What's up, YouTube? In the current spirit of things, we've been trying out the invasion of Ikoria tech and some of these other shadow builds, and decided to test it out in Jund. I know that somebody, Sanatoider, posted a couple trophies with Jund Shadow, trying out the invasion Vampire X Mage tech. Just kind of wanted to try it out with my own little twist on some stuff, trying out some Traverse the Ulvenwalds along with the invasion of Ikoria, get a little bit closer to the Sultai build. Jund gives us access to things like Ragavan, Unholy Heat, Lightning Bolt, Terminate, Kroxa, Ancient Grudge. Really, really powerful cards, especially against decks like Murktide. Kroxa, really great grind tools the game goes on. Also tutorable with both Traverse and Invasion. Ragavan, like premier one drop in Modern at the moment. Just absolutely lights out for a lot of decks to deal with, especially if it goes unanswered on the first turn. If you're looking for like some flex options, there's always the possibility of things like Ren and 6. I know a lot of people don't particularly like Ren in some of the shadow builds. Personally, I think it's a very solid card. Sideboard, just trying out some pieces like Soul Guide Lantern over Nihil Spellbomb, since it doesn't target in the face of Leyline of Sanctity. A couple Chalice of Void for the Cascade decks. 2 Crime and Punishment. Uh, Partly for Hammer, partly for creativity, partly just to try out the card because I've seen it do a lot of work in other people's lists. So yeah, it's about all we got. Let's go ahead and start going over the matches so you can see some of the gameplay. See if Invasion does more for me in Jund than it has in Sultai and Golgari. As I've kind of mentioned in the Golgari video, I've not been that impressed with the Invasion tech. So I'm really hoping that maybe Jund will help kind of push that up a little bit. Essentially, Invasion to me has only been as good as like Shadow and Tarmogoyf have been in any particular matchup. So if you run into something where they're not good, Invasion's not good. And if you're already seeing your threats without Invasion, then you could be using those spots to play something to make those matchups better. But if you've got Invasion in that slot, then you're not going to be able to make your Goyf and Shadow better, since you're just playing more functional copies of those, if it makes sense. Pretty easy keep on the play. Turn 1 Channeler. Turn 2, we've got Bolt access, so we could like bolt ourselves Shadow if it's something unfair. If it's something fair, then maybe we lean more towards holding up Bolt. Opponent griefs us. I'm a little surprised they took the Invasion there in the face of like Bolt and Shadow. So now I just get to like get down a decent sized Shadow on turn 2. And yeah, we just get lethal. So important sequencing note there. We bolt on their upkeep to play around Force of Negation. If I bolt on my turn and they have Force, they can untap, play land, and Living End. If I bolt on their upkeep, then they cannot pay for Force because they only have 2 mana, and they don't have, or they can't discard a card on their own turn to pay for Force. Also can't like Mystical Dispute the Bolt, so pretty safe. Sideboarding against Living In, like Chalice of the Void's coming in, Soul Guide Lantern's coming in, and just boarding out like mostly the Invasion tech. It's just very, very slow in a matchup like this. If I had like a hate piece I could get off of it, then maybe. Like I don't think Dothy Voidwalker's a human. So maybe you could look into like getting Dothy off an Invasion. Here, so opponent goes for the turn 2 grief, takes my Thoughtseize. I'm just playing out like a vanilla Turok just to have something on the battlefield. It also gets bigger if my opponent starts cycling, so it does give me like a reasonably sized threat if they don't have a create or don't have a living end yet. And judging by these first couple turns, it doesn't look like they do. Petty theft is fine because petty theft does not sacrifice all creatures in play and put all the creatures from the graveyard onto the battlefield. So doing a whole mess of cycling, and that is not a living end. So the game's over. That's actually the first time I think I've ever had a game against living end where they just whiffed that hard on finding a cascade spell. My guess is like maybe they naturally drew a couple living ends. All right, so mulligan decision. One lander, no red source, and we're on the draw. So even if we had a red source, we're probably throwing this back, but being on the draw makes it even worse. But here, two lander, got double Goyf, we've got Bolt or Channeler, depending on what we're up against. So, Invasion of Ergamon. So, creativity, we can tell by Archon getting ditched in the invasion. If you haven't seen this invasion before, it's a red and a green ETB. You discard a card, draw a card, and make a treasure. So another like reasonable value piece out of the creativity deck. Opponent ditches triple Archon. They do get a couple threats out. We're just looking for like a removal spell so we can kill a token. Hopefully kill our opponent. Thoughtseize takes Bitter Reunion, and we sack Nurturing Peatland for the second bolt. So really nice there to steal game one in a not very favorable matchup. Sideboarding against creativity, boarding out a lot of the invasion package. Again, turn 3, turn 4, it's really slow. We need to be interacting, not like tapping out to get a shadow that's not that good. Boarding in things like engineered explosives. If you're running Orvar, you can board that in here, but do have to be a little bit careful. Did find out recently that Orvar's ETB trigger, or Orvar's copy trigger, can be Veil of Summered. Does not feel good. Do not recommend. 0 out of 10. But we do have to mold a 5 here and just kind of hope that our opponent doesn't have Veil, doesn't have Renin 6. I usually do not like playing out something into a possible Renin 6, but I really don't have much going on here. So we see that their hand is double Archon, Hidetsugu, Veil of Summer, Ren down ticked. So we got that off the board. Now we found a threat. Our Goyf is a 6/7. It's very, very sizable Goyf. Hidetsugu doesn't mess with it. I really thought that they were going to play the Hidetsugu there and just try to nuke the yard next turn. But because they didn't play the Hidetsugu, we might just get to race here, which is what's happening. Like we found an artifact to grow Goyf to a 7/8, and Goyf just got across the finish line very, very handedly. So ended up getting that little buff from them playing a battle instead of us. Love to see it. So if you're wondering why I'm like leaned over on this side, I've got the replay up on a monitor over here, and then like recording software here. All right, so scam. Take our Ragavan, take our Shadow. We could cycle Street Wraith to try to find like a fatal push right away. Wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. And yeah, we'll scoop it up to her opponent having the removal spell there. Because after we take another hit, we are just way, way, way too far behind. Sideboarding against Scam. Wraiths are pretty bad. Some of the hand disruptions bad. Boarding in like Soul Guide Lanterns, extra copies of Terminate, Turok, anything that kind of interacts either with our opponent's hand, graveyard, additional threats. Getting a little flooded here. Soul Guide Lanterns, okay. It's not something I'm really interested in. Yeah, and Unlicensed Hearse and our double Tarmogoyf start hurts. Hurts quite a bit. But not seeing a Fable here is nice. So I'm kind of expecting my opponent to have like a hard cast Grief. Turns out they just got double removal spell. They did have a Grief, as well as another Fatal Push. Terminate the Grief, just kind of hoping they don't fire up the Hearse in response so I can dash the Ragavan. Cannot cast a Fury. Third Grief. All right, well, Turok gets one card out of hand. That's better than no cards, especially when that one card's a Spyro. Ouch. Double ouch. I've had a rough couple of weeks against Scam. I don't know what it is. These are the kind of hands that I'm always really excited about with Jun Shadow. When you're on the play, you've got options between like Thoughtseize and Ragavan. You've got Goyf as a follow up. You're losing life aggressively for a Shadow. This is the kind of hand that does everything that you want. Upside of Ragavan is if you connect, you get to double spell on turn 2. The downside is if you don't connect, then you just start running into the issue of like not having a good follow up. So we're up against what I'm assuming is like a 5-color Bring to Light deck. We see Valky, Dryad of the Elysian Grove, Wrenn and 6, Leyline Binding, all pretty indicative of being a Bring to Light deck. And then obviously Ragavan seeing Bring to Light off the top of their library kind of gives it away, right? Then Escape Shift. Escape Shift is annoying, but not the end of the world. Traverse with Delirium, so we can get lethal a bunch of ways here, or present lethal, I should say. Uh, so that fetch land means that they have to block the shadow. And if they block the shadow, they're taking 7 and they're dead to the lightning bolt. The Dryad dies because the shadow outgrows it. So, yeah, pretty good spot to be in, if I do say so myself. And I do, because I said it. Sideboarding, Bolt and Unholy Heat, both pretty bad. They're pretty low on creatures. Turok's okay to bring in. Not a lot of great options here. We're just kind of hoping for a quick clock, reasonable pressure. If you had like Force of Vigor, I'd bring it in here. Position snags Rin. So we see double Bring to Light. Dash Ragavan. And I'm not inquisitioning post or post combat because I want to just kick a Turok here. Start nabbing some of these cards. Really not that interested in firing off an Inquisition into like known Bring to Light. All right, so you do get to nab this other Bring to Light. It's important to keep up with like what is or isn't able to kill you here. So opponent's got a Dryad, no cards in hand. If they top deck a fetch land, they can deal 6. So either 6 to me, which is fine because I'm not dead and I kill them with an attack and a bolt. They can deal 6 towards the shadow, which I can respond to the second Valakut trigger with bolting myself and force a chump block with a Dryad. They could deal 6 to the Turok for whatever reason. Then we attack with Shadow. If they don't block, they die. If they do block, then we get Dryad off the board. But opponent decides to point at our face, makes it easy. Bolt them, attack in for lethal. Creativity, or not creativity, Bring to Light. Really good matchup for Grixis and like blue-black. It's not as good for Jun, but sometimes you just have a very pressure-heavy hand and you're able to get across the finish line. Another pretty good Jun Shadow hand. Got Ragavan. That's like the mark of a good hand. Do you have Ragavan? If yes, cool. So go ahead and strip their hand of all spells. Top deck another Ren and 6. A little bit annoying, but not like into the world annoying. I'm just going to start cycling stuff. And I'm just going to hit my opponent in the face. I could try really aggressively to like attack the Ren, but at the end of the day, I kind of want to just hit them. Hope they don't have Supreme Verdict or Solitude. If they have Solitude here, they should have Solituded during their own main phase. There's no reason to go to my turn and run into the possibility of me like fatal pushing the shadow that you target with Solitude, and it just becomes like a chump block situation, or worse yet, having 2 removal spells and being able to kill the shadow that you target and the Solitude itself. So I think that's pretty greedy. Greedy like this, keeping a 1-lander just because it's got double Ragavan and Thoughtseize and stuff. Kind of prioritizing invasion over Thoughtseize with getting that stomping ground here. But I do have a pretty chunky Goyf. Never mind. Omnath, get ragged down. And here I really want to get down a bunch of cards more than I want to attack at the Teferi. Get Tef off the board. Or not Tef, Fury off the board. I know they've got a Solitude. Obviously, I didn't know they had EE on too, but the way she goes sometimes. And this is really what I wanted to talk about before this league started. I mentioned Invasion is as good as Shadow and Tarmogoyf are. And this is one of those situations where like Invasion is awful against a deck that just takes care of Shadow and Tarmogoyf easily. Because all you're doing with Invasion is like putting more copies of those specific cards on the field. Um, if I'd hit the fourth land, I could have Invasion for Kroxa, and maybe things go a little differently. But at least at the moment, looking pretty rough. Yeah, then Eladomer's call for another Solitude. But yeah, you can put like your flex creatures in there and try to make Invasion work with going to get like Collector Oof or Haywire Might, Hex Parasite, whatever the case may be. But ultimately, the bulk of the heavy lifting that Invasion does is going to be getting Shadow or Goyf. Occasionally, get Hex Mage, sack it, get your backside of an Invasion. But that is still just like a vanilla 8/8 creature. So if they could deal with Tarmogoyf and Shadow, I guarantee you they can deal with the dinosaur as well. So don't think that like that really changes anything just because you have that line. Obviously, if I was hitting land drops a little bit more and I was able to grist more reliably or something similar, then maybe it would have looked a little bit better. I also just realized that the list I've got shown on screen is the list after I took out Battle Rage and added in Grist and Dismember and stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna have to fix that in the description. Make sure it's linked to the correct deck list. But in that league, I tried out Dragon's Rage Channeler. The list I'm showing is the post-edit version where I took Channeler out. I did not like Channeler at all. And I haven't liked Channeler and Jund Shadow in a while. And most of it's because you're really not trying to play like a value game with Jund Shadow. You're trying to get the game over with. And I don't think Dragon's Rage Channeler does a really good job of accomplishing that goal. But I am interested in trying Jund Shadow with Invasions and Renin 6 so that you're able to more consistently like Invasion for 2 for Kroxa or 3 for Grist, whatever the case may be. I think that to me feels like it opens up a lot more possibilities. But right now I'm like sitting at or living at 2 or 3 lands more often than not, and Invasion's looking really, really bad because it's either Invasion for 0, and that means you have to play Dryad Arbor, which I hate, or Invasion for 1 for Shadow. And if Shadow's already not good in the matchup, then Invasioning for 1 isn't any better. That was a long-winded explanation. But yeah, otherwise, gonna try some more Jund Shadow at some point. Just wanted to go ahead and throw this video up so y'all could check it out, see what kind of my thought process is while I'm testing a lot of this Invasion tech and thinking about where I want to go with it and if it's worth it. And yeah, hope you like the video. As always, if you're not following already, feel free to drop a follow on the YouTube channel. Greatly helps. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll have a link to the live stream chat below. Drop a like on the video if you're enjoying the content. Otherwise, give some suggestions of what you'd like to see next. Hope everybody has an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe, enjoy some good food and company. Catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.